so much for coming. I'm Parmesh. I head the Godrej DEI Lab, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to Women in India, to our Women in India Summit, where we're going to talk about accelerating gender inclusivity in workplaces as well. I hope you've been enjoying our Women and Gender playlist. We listened to it even after this event. And we thought we'd do it as just one of the different lead-ins we have to the day to welcome all our champions of gender inclusivity whom you'll be hearing about here, as well as all of you in the audience. We have folks from corporations, we have business school students, we have people who used to come to our former Godrej India Culture Lab as well. So warm welcome to all of you. Can we clap and celebrate all of you? We set up the Godrej DEI Lab some months ago to work at this interface between all the change that corporations want to make, all the change that universities and academic spaces want to make, to try and help shift, change government policy frameworks around inclusion as well, work with students, work with the general public through communication channels, to spread this message that, more inclusion leads to better, outcomes for everyone. And we're so excited to partner, to have found soulmates and partners over the past few months with whom we can collaborate as well. Our collaborators for this particular event are the incredible Udaiti Foundation, the Center for Economic and Data Analysis at Ashoka University, CEDA, and Dasra. And this is actually the beginning of Dasra Philanthropy Week, which happens later as well. So can we have a big round of applause for all our collaborators? This is just one of the many events that are going to come up over the next month here. For example, in a few days, you're going to see an agribusiness summit that Godrej Agrovate, one of our companies, is doing. We will be launching a film. It's like the world premiere of a film on increasing women in manufacturing and chemicals here on March 18th. We actually have another event tomorrow as well on technology, how technology can help persons with disabilities and so on. So there's a lot of action that's going to be here. So if you're not following us, the DEI Lab, on our mailing list, just message us, follow us on Instagram, follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll let you know when our website comes out as well. I want to thank all our partners, all the various collaborators who made this happen, all the DEI teams at Godrej. So our lab is part of a network of various DEI. Each of our businesses has DEI teams, and we work together to make Godrej as well as India and the world more inclusive. So thank you to all the different DEI teams. Thank you to our canteen and support staff. I'm saying my thank yous in the beginning because, there'll be others at the end as well. And I just want to acknowledge everyone who's just come together to put this event together. The IT team, our security team, Narendra and the AV team. Let's make everything fabulous today. Harshal and our video team, Ganesh for all our printouts, all our various team members beyond the Godrej DEI teams, whether it's Abhay, Vishnu, and others who've come to help for this event. We want to thank our collaborators, Access for All. So we have Tinsi from Access for All, who will be signing throughout this event. So thank you, Tinsi. Access for All has also printed Braille menus for all of us. So anyone needs Braille menus, they're available with us at the entrance, as well as in the cafe next door. So if anyone needs help with that, we have that as well. Now I'd like to invite the patron saint of inclusion at Godrej, the executive chairperson of GCPL, Nisa Godrej, to give the opening remarks.
I was expecting some more high-tempo music, Parmesh, to start that off. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I don't know about patron saint. Our corporate communications teams tell people to say things like that. So what they and Sujit is sitting out there, and Sujit's like, Shireen is coming, and CNBC is there. So here's what I have to start with. So Godrej Consumer Products is a company in the fast-moving consumer products industry. There's some colleagues sitting here. These days, it's more like slow-moving, but that's another talk. And so what I am supposed to tell you is about our best self. And we are very proud that our board is 50% women, and this is one of the highest. Yeah. They did say they would clap. You smile broadly, and then you go sit down. but I have a little bit more to tell you. And actually, our ecosystem is also about 50% women in the company. But you might have noticed that my last name is the same as the name, it matches the company's. And there are not many benefits of nepotism for the world at large, as we can tell by our current political predicament. But it does mean that I can't get fired if I tell you about our true selves. So here we go a little bit off script. So while my board is 50% women, our senior management leadership of 11 people has only one woman. And this has actually come down in the last few years. In white-collar representation, we are a few points below 30%, while Hindustan Unilever, considered not just the biggest, but probably the best company in our industry by many metrics, is closer to 50%. My 50% overall ecosystem number is driven by a very large base of women in manufacturing in Africa. The number is so low in India that I'm not even going to share it. It's something we're working on, but it's a low number. And my women engagement is lower than men. Attrition is higher than men. And I have companies in the group where representation is less than 10%. So I'm sharing this true self with you today because I think that's what we're here for. So, you know, I was looking through Udaiti's Women in India Inc. report, and they said that 3/4 of companies surveyed said that they have these representation goals, but just 20% of those actually have plans to go with those goals. So then you can see where the problem is starting, and that resonated with me. And I'm here today because I believe that Godrej is actually lucky to have a reputation bigger than what we actually do. And while we are probably above average in DEI, we're certainly not excellent. And that's not just, it's not good for business, and it's also no fun. So coming out of COVID, one of the first things we did was to invest more deeply in our DEI efforts and set up the DEI Lab, with Parmesh leading it, where the mandate is to create a balanced and inclusive Godrej while learning and partnering with other organizations and sharing whatever we learn openly and freely. So I'm really delighted today that the DEI Lab is collaborating with Udaiti, Dasra, and SIDA to bring you this conversation today, and that Udaiti is putting out the kind of data it is, because I do believe, and really thank you, Pooja, for doing this work, that this shift is possible only through an honest and deep data approach and a real understanding of what works and what doesn't. What you measure in management is what actually moves. So this is extremely important work. I also believe that individual purpose and love can illuminate organizations. I've been privileged to sit on the Bharti Airtel board and watch Amrita Pada, who joined the company 2 years as the head of HR. She's moved women representation from 9.5% to 16.5% in 18 months. I've seen closer to home, I don't know, Megha and Zoya, this is what happens when people come late, but anyway. Megha and Zoya do some very solid work in the LGBTQI space with over 100 Godrejites who now identify as LGBTQI in the company. These were not mandates handed down by the boards to these individuals. This was done from their own hearts and initiative. So, you know, there's a lot of, I think, HR leaders here, a lot of people in leadership positions, and frankly, no one needs to put you in a position for you to be a leader. So please don't wait around for someone else to do the work. Don't complain about a fragmented world around us. Instead, be the person who leads to create these flourishing islands of balance and inclusivity wherever you can. And a special shout out today to my close friend and favorite, Neera, and her team Dasra, at Dasra, and Ashish and his team, not just for the privilege to partner today, but for all the work you do across sectors to leave things better then you found them. A really big thank you. I love the author Glennon Doyle's statement that imagination is not where you go to forget reality, but where you go to remember it. And reality should be us living and working in a gender-balanced world. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you for that, Nisa. So the way this evening is going to go is after Nisa's opening remarks, we're going to have individual addresses by Ashish and Ashwini, and then Shireen, we're going to call you on stage to moderate a wonderful semi-circular table as well. So Ashish, I'm just going to introduce you first, and then we'd like you to come up. Ashish, for those of you who don't know, is amongst many other things one of India's best-known philanthropists. He's the founder and CEO of the Convergence Foundation, which is dedicated to advancing India's economic growth, but on so many multiple axes. He's played pivotal roles in founding Ashoka University and is also involved in Central Square Foundation. Both have the aim of advancing educational reform in our country as well. Before that, he founded and led Chris Capital, which was a private equity firm, and he holds degrees from both Yale and HBS, although we won't hold those against you. Ashish, come on up.
But I shall try to. Thank you all for being here. This is a very important topic, and it's great to see that we have a full house and actually a spillover room as well. So I'll first just quickly introduce the Udaiti Foundation. We could just go to the next slide, please. This is a foundation that was set up actually only in the last couple of years. And really, our belief was that if India has to progress and become a $10 trillion economy, we cannot get there without women playing a much larger role in our economic growth. The female labor force participation, all of us know, is abysmally low, and we still have a huge pay gap and very few women in leadership roles. I mean, if you look at the top 2,000 companies, it's less than 5% in CEO positions. So we believe that our approach to doing this is data-backed evidence, and I'll talk about this in a minute, meaningful collaborations, and scalable solutions that we will look at. If you just go to the next slide, please. We've already started having lots of dialogues and actually learning from the ecosystem. Next slide. Around various issues from hiring to retention to returnship, advancement in leadership, and have built a body of work through these conversations with corporate leaders like yourself. If you could go to the next slide. One of the initiatives, I talked about a data-driven approach, is really to pull together something we call Close the Gender Gap. It's a data platform. So some of you may know that SEBI has mandated that all companies, large companies, listed companies, need to disclose in their BRSR, their business responsibility statement, gender-related data. Now that lies buried inside annual reports. What we've done is we've essentially scraped all that data and put it together intelligently into one platform. So it's now you can compare across sectors, across companies, and look in aggregate to see how companies are doing. This covers over 2,000 companies across 23 sectors, and 2 million women out of 10 plus million people or employees in total are represented on this platform. And the average female board representation is 2 in number, the 2 women on the average board, and about 19% in key management positions, which reflects roughly the overall workforce. If we could go to the next slide, please. What we want to do with this data is use it both for accountability, but also as a way for people to find a pathway to sort of move forward. I think Nisa correctly pointed out that the survey we had done showed that 73% of companies actually look at the data, but only 21% of companies have an action plan. So what we want is companies need to have an action plan. They need to have a target, an action plan. They need to disclose that. So it's not enough just to disclose the data. I think what we need is an action plan that's also in the public domain so that investors, board members, media can track that and actually hold companies accountable. We have designed these scorecards by sector and by company. So for all 2,000 plus companies and across these 23 sectors. So this is just a sample. It shows you, for instance, in the FMCG sector, that about 13%, there's only 13% female representation. It's 10% at the employee level and 15% at the worker level. Far below global standards. And actually, interestingly, this sector is even below the overall, the average in the list of 2,000 companies. We have much more detail in the actual sector scorecards. This is just a snapshot. And the idea of the sector scorecards, we can now share this with the industry bodies. NASSCOM can get a scorecard for all the IT companies, BPO companies, and other sectors as well. And similarly with CII, FICCI. So we plan to partner with industry associations to get this data out there. At the company level, we have a lot of detailed data as well that we've organized and put together. And we want to get these company scorecards out to every company so that we can play it back to the CEOs. They have their own data, but they don't have a sense of where they stack up versus the industry. Are they first quartile, third quartile? Who are the best in class in their industry? How do they stack up versus global peers, etc.? So all of that comes into the company scorecard. We are still in the process of piloting this. So what I would request is a show of hands of people in this room who in their company would like to help us sort of pilot this. If you just put up your hand, we'll take a note of it. Or just later on, if you could just talk to someone from the Udaiti team. And Shireen, I'll ask you for your help. We'll share all of these with you. Next time you interview a business leader, please push them on this. So if you go to the next slide. So apart from the data-driven approach, we're also creating a circle of champions. We'd like to request many of you here in the room to join this circle of champions. Manisha Girotra, who's on our board, is part of the circle of champions, and many others as well. Ashwini, who's a leading academic in this space, is one of our circle of champions. So again, if you're interested, please do reach out to the Udaiti team. Pooja is here, her team members are here, and please join this circle of champions. It's a group that will really help Udaiti with its mission. The next slide, please. And finally, we actually work on a number of research outputs. We did this HR manager survey. The data Nisa quoted actually came out of that survey. And we pulled together data from a number of the academic studies as well that CEDA and other places are doing. If you go to the next slide, what you'll see is there's also a number of other, so we work in partnership with others. So with Dasra, this work around women in leadership in the healthcare sector, with ACT around women in the startup ecosystem. We're now actually interestingly working with the UP government. The UP government has a whole bunch of schemes for women. And they called us in first to do a diagnostic. So Pooja and team went in and did a very good diagnostic looking at all their schemes comprehensively and sort of played it back to them, which they hadn't looked at comprehensively. And now they've asked us to actually work with them on a number of policy changes that they want to implement, but also developing gender disaggregated data, which states generally don't have. So they can actually track the performance of their schemes that are related to women, because they have a real desire to increase female labor force participation in the state. We also are, as you can see here, working with an ecosystem of partners. We're doing a number of case studies on companies. You know, there are companies that are outliers in every sector. So there are some sectors that are already doing well, like in the hospital space, in healthcare, high representation of women, largely driven by the fact that there are a lot of nurses in hospitals. So we need more women in leadership positions in that sector. The IT BPO sector does reasonably well, still below global standards, but we need more women in leadership positions, middle management, more women coming back after they take a break in their careers. But there are many sectors which are actually the largest employers in India. The manufacturing sector employs 60 million people. The construction sector employs 60 million people. The logistics sector employs 20+ million people. In many of these, there are outliers. You know, the typical stereotype is women can't work in these sectors. But I was just sharing earlier today that Amazon has a warehouse in Manesar where 70% of the employees are women. Lodha is developing a project where 100% of the women, of the workers will be women in that project, which will break this sort of stereotype. Many of you know that Ola has a factory down south, which is 100% women. So I think we need some of these proof points, particularly in these sectors where there's low representation, but also just general best practices that we need to capture and share with the ecosystem. So again, if you would like to participate in this, please come forward, meet the team. So there are 3 calls to action. First is, if you're interested in becoming a Circle of Champions, please reach out. Second, if you want to interact with the data and give us feedback. And the third, with regards to the case studies or pilots that you can work with us on. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Ashish, for talking about the importance of data-based action and also the collaboration between the private sector, between academia and governments to really move the needle as well. And those 3 calls to action, we can discuss all of those as we mingle and network with each other over snacks after this. And we hope that we can form some of these connects and relationships and actually take your 3 calls to actions ahead as well. So thank you. Next up, we have the brilliant economist, Dr. Ashwini Deshpande. Dr. Ashwini Deshpande is a professor of economics and the founding director for the Center for Economic Data and Analysis at Ashoka University. Her PhD and early publications were on the international debt crisis of the 1980s. She's since then worked extensively on the economics of discrimination and affirmative action with a focus on caste and gender in India. She's the author of Grammar of Caste, Economic Discrimination in Contemporary India, and Affirmative Action in India. Thank you so much for coming here and for joining us and for sharing.
Thank you everyone for coming here. It's great to see this packed hall debating issues that some of us are very, very passionate about. Parmesh talked about my work on caste, but today I'm actually going to talk a little bit about my understanding of this whole question of women's participation in paid work and women's economic empowerment. So the point is, when you look at a country like India, and these, what I'm about to say is absolutely true, there are all kinds of barriers that women face that emanate from the household. So women get married, then they're expected to play a certain role in their marital home. In terms of time spent on domestic chores, Indian data shows that women spend as much as 10 times in terms of hours, more time on domestic chores than men do. So the inequality in terms of domestic work is particularly stark in India. When children get born, women find it difficult to combine motherhood with paid work. There is childcare responsibilities, there are elderly care responsibilities, there's fear of sexual harassment both on the way to work as well as at the workplace. There are conservative families, conservative communities, et cetera, et cetera. In economics, in economist language, all of these factors are called supply-side barriers to women's economic participation because they prevent women from supplying their labor to the labor market. And these are extremely important, right? But the labor market is a market, and just as there's supply, there's also demand, right? And so what we also have to pay attention to is, are there barriers that come in the way of women accessing jobs or staying on in careers or advancing ahead that come not necessarily from factors within the household or not from what are called supply side factors, but come because of workplace cultures, come because of employer bias, come because of maybe implicit unconscious way of thinking. In other words, are there demand side factors that prevent women from expressing their full productive potential and prevent women from participating in the economy to the extent that their productive capacities allow? And indeed there are. So not just in India, everywhere in the world, there are demand side factors that particularly pose constraints to women more than they pose constraints to men, for men in terms of participation. And this vicious cycle of demand side, supply side, etc. So when you think of an employer, they say, well, I want to hire women, but where are the women? I don't find them. And even when they join, they just drop out at the time of marriage or at the time of motherhood. Or they stay on, when they come back, they are not as interested. Economists call it low attachment to the workplace. They just want to go home. They are worried about their children, etc., etc. As an individual employer, I can't solve that problem. And that's a legitimate argument, right? But the point is that when you look at the history of social change, when you look at how societies have changed over the decades, you find that this vicious cycle of low supply, low demand, low supply, low demand, how do you break it? And the point at which it has been broken in history tells us that the way in which this cycle breaks is when the demand side barriers ease. In every country of the world, social norms and social factors have changed in response to changes in material conditions, not the other way around. It's never been a change of heart that has led to a change in social condition, a change in material conditions. It's a change in material conditions that then forces a change in the way people think. When enough women start going out and working in paid work, things are bound to change inside the home. They may not be overnight, they may be backlash, it may be slow, it might be up and down, it'll be volatile, it'll be uneven, yes, to all of that. Yet, over a point in time, things will change because history tells us things have changed. You look at even a country like Bangladesh, which had, 30 years ago, it had a labor force participation rate of 3%. 3%. And nobody could have then foreseen the increase in labor force participation rates in Bangladesh, particularly because of the social factors, right? And yet you do see that. You see an improvement in contraception usage, you see an improvement in many conditions. And in India too. If you look at fertility rates in India, they have declined to the point of replacement. Maternal mortality rates have declined dramatically for a country at the level of income as India is. It's a remarkable achievement. Women's education over the last decade has expanded rapidly such that now male-female gaps in education have virtually been eliminated, right? So women are more educated, women have more aspirations. Fertility rates, so childcare responsibility overall is declining. The gaps in fertility rates have also been declining across regions, across communities, etc. So it's all good news, right? Why don't we see the next piece of good news, which is an increase in women's participation in paid work? And there I think we need to think more carefully about the structural barriers, about the demand side barriers that prevent women from entering workplaces. And our work at CEDA, my colleagues are here, together we are engaged in a project. Some components of it are with the Udaiti Foundation, some we are doing elsewhere, and we also have a body of work that you can find on our website, where we show the role of demand side factors. Even a simple thing like how a job ad is worded can make a difference to the proportion of women who apply, right? In order to retain women, does workplace culture have to change? Because it's actually costly for employers for women to drop out and then for them to rehire new people, train them, which seems, so every time there's a question of providing for female employees, you'll say, oh, well, that's very costly. It's just better not to have women because, you have to then make all these provisions, right? Except if you had them, And if you made the provisions, it'll be less costly than having to deal with turnover. It'll also make your workplace more diverse, of course, but diversity has its benefits in terms of a lot of workplace productivity metrics. So it makes good business sense, even if somebody didn't care about gender equality, which, by the way, you should all care about it. But even if you didn't, hypothetically, the point is that hiring women, retaining them, letting them advance, allowing them to express their full productive potential. You know, if women are kept at the bottom of the ladder, doing the same thing over and over and over again, what's in it for me? Why should I just be stuck at that low level? You know, so when you think of women, you can also think of women as productive, intelligent human beings, just as the men are, and they, you know, allow them to advance also, and pay attention to unconscious biases that may prevent that kind of that mindset. So, you know, I'll stop here, but basically what I wanted to point out is that research shows the importance of demand-side barriers. That doesn't mean that we don't realize that there are supply-side barriers, but I think supply will change in response to demand. So, you know, today, as I'm here before an audience which many of you are employers, many of you are able to make a difference in this space. So I'd like to end by just making a plea for understanding the important role of employers in solving this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deshpande, for telling us about the importance of demand-side barriers as well as supply-side barriers, and for encouraging all of us as employers to actually step up and contribute. We're now going to go into an exciting panel discussion, and happy to share that besides all of us here, we'll be Officer and SVP of Corporate HR at Wipro, boasts over 2 decades of expertise spanning diverse HR domains. She spearheads Wipro's DEI efforts, the DEI Council, shaping a cultural change initiative that's been recognized globally. Sunita's leadership has been pivotal in Wipro's acclaimed inclusion framework that we're trying to learn from, notably through initiatives like Women of Wipro. Thank you so much. And last but not the least, if we can have, Shireen, this is for you actually. If we can have, wait, just hang on there. There's a full, yeah, if we can have Shireen's slide. Shireen Bhan. And I thought we just keep this. So that on the right, incidentally, Shireen is the first and only fashion magazine cover that Shireen ever shot for. Incidentally, I happened to do the story for it, and we had a blast in spending days across abandoned mills in Parel, shooting for this as well. But Shireen, since then, and as you can see, Shireen hasn't changed. This is 20 years ago, this is 10 years ago. Here you are right now as well. This was on the Yale campuses. So Shireen, what you have done in redefining Indian business journalism and focusing on women, whether it's what women want, whether it's through shows like Young Turks, in which you have consciously tried to champion women entrepreneurs, or with Future Female Forward that you're doing right now, in really chronicling this change, but also urging corporate India to do better. So thank you so much for all you've done, and welcome. Now you can come up. Welcome to Godrej. And I'm going to give this over to you and hand it over to you.
Thank you, Parmesh. Thank you so much, Parmesh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. What an absolute pleasure it is to be back here. You know that photograph? He was responsible for the first time that I ever used nail paint in my life. That is the contribution of Parmesh in my life, besides many other wonderful things. But it's so wonderful to be here in Vikhroli, back at the Godrej campus. And I haven't been to this new office. It's a fabulous, wonderful new office. So I'm grateful to be back here. But you know, this is an issue that I have championed at CNBC TV-18 for a little over a decade now, and the reason behind it is because every 8th of March, or around the 8th of March, I would be inundated with requests saying, can you come and talk to us about what it means to be a woman leader? And I was like, I'm not, a CEO, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm not a founder, I'm not a film star. Like, how is it that I'm being inundated with so many requests on the 8th of March? Where are all the other women? And that got me started on this project over 10 years ago called What Women Really Want, which was really about looking for women leaders across different sectors, across different geographies, and understanding what the problem was. As Dr. Deshpande said, both on the supply side as well as on the demand side, diagnosing what the issues were and then prescribing what companies were doing to make amends, to make changes. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. I think there are no easy answers. It is a complex situation, and I think it's very different for different companies as per their size and scale as well. Indian SMEs have a different challenge. My panel sitting here has a different set of challenges that they can address and at least throw money at the problem to some extent, but that is not necessarily the only answer. For us in the media, I think changing the narrative has been very important. Storytelling has been very important. For instance, I am tired of people saying that women lack ambition, because that's not the case. It's not that they lack ambition, they lack the infrastructure to to realize the potential that they have, to realize their dreams, and that's what we've attempted to change. As one of our guests on a program that I was doing a couple of days ago said, that this notion that women are risk averse is not true. They're more risk aware, and there's a difference in the way that we actually use and throw these sort of terms around that create more stereotypes. So without further ado, let me kickstart the conversation here with our panelists on what the road ahead looks like. And Dr. Gopinath, I'm going to start by asking you, because the Reserve Bank of India has had women across rank and file. We've had 2 women deputy governors, including yourself, and of course Usha Thorat as well. I want to understand from you, as you look at the problem today and through your own experience, through your own lens, what do you believe can be done to ensure that we see more women up across different functions as well as in leadership positions?
Well, in the Reserve Bank of India, there's really equality of opportunity. So basically there is no policy as such for gender diversity. Everybody enters the bank on the basis of a competitive exam, and that itself is very good. Because once you provide this particular method of joining an institution, everybody is equal, because it's a competitive exam. And I can say that both men and women, whoever does well, and of course we have interviews, but even then they are able to compete on equal terms. And that is where the biases and other things don't come when you have this kind of equality of opportunity. Even after joining the bank, I'm not saying that like we just get promoted based on our seniority or something like that. There are interviews, and meritocracy does play a part. But even then, there is some semblance of policy, there is a semblance of a logic and rationale in doing certain things. So it's not totally discretionary. It's not pick and choose. You have to be professionals. So basically, I think so long as any organization, at least the Reserve Bank does, recognize women as professionals and not as by gender, that itself is a very good, is a positive.
So there was a level playing field to start with, and you
yes,
believe that
we'll start with itself level
exactly,
playing field.
and that helped then in creating this culture which is more merit-based and treating women as equal professionals. But Prabha, Nisa was talking about the slow-moving FMCG business at this point in time. That debate I'll get into on another day. But let's address this issue. I mean, you're dealing with markets that don't cater to or are not a homogeneous mass of consumers. Why is it that companies don't then recognize the need or the necessity or the benefits of diversity? Because you're reaching out to a different segment of consumers all the time. Why is it that at the back end, companies don't invest as much in being able to create diversity within the organization?
So good afternoon, Shireen, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
No, not as yet. Is Prabha's... Can you try again, Prabha? Yeah, I think it's on. Yeah.
Sorry, that was my good afternoon that you missed. So I think, if I may, Shireen, I don't think it's that companies don't recognize the value of diversity. In fact, now there is empirical evidence on a slew of companies that are diverse versus not diverse, and results, as you know, are better in the diverse companies. I think it's a question of saying there, at the intake level, most good companies, like Dr. Gopinath said, and Dr. Gopinath is on our board, so I have to now oscillate between Dr. Gopinath and Shamla very carefully.
Not doctorate, I'm not a doctor.
So,
PhD.
At intake level, actually, when we get a balanced slate, we get a balanced recruitment of women. Then there are crucible moments in life where women drop out, marriage, children, elder care, and then when they feel that they've hit a glass ceiling equivalent. So I think there's work for companies to do at all of these points, both on the overt factors of, can you provide childcare, can you ensure there's medical, maternity leave, can you make sure that your career doesn't suffer when you come back after maternity leave? And those are, like was pointed out, I think the more obvious things, and those can be solved by policy. And I think policies are truly getting quite advanced and very much towards building equity. What companies need to do more of is tackling the insidious barriers. The barriers of, oh, she has great capability, but she doesn't have leadership. No idea what that means. And just to be able to define what that means and to help people to understand that some of these barriers, which are not even conscious, it's not like people are doing it on purpose, that the unconscious biases, how do we bring them out into the open? How do we have an open conversation about them? And how do we ensure that equity is maintained as you solve for these unconscious biases? I think is an area perhaps that companies need to do much more work, and certainly I think we need to do more work. We've started the journey, but definitely more to do.
So how are you addressing this issue? Let's talk about that.
So we have started a few things. A series of workshops on unconscious bias, which are all done through role modeling and hypothetical situations, so you're not feeling under the pump yourself. That really helps, because then people have the intelligence to go back and introspect themselves on, why did I respond the way I responded? I think that has been really useful, and we're running those across the company. And then, of course, we have the balanced slate at interview levels as we look to make people move up grades and up performance, which I think helps as well, because if you're making sure you're seeing equally 2 and 2, so to say, it then makes the decision-making process much fairer. So these are the kind of things that we're doing. There is more that can be done for sure.
There is plenty more that needs to be done. Yes, you wanted to make a point, ma'am.
I just wanted to make a point that I know of a company, that has a platform. So where, every employee will have to, use that platform or work on a kind of surveys and other things where if there are any unconscious biases, it will come out. It's like a psychometric test. And so the company would get data on how employees' attitudes are. And therefore, with this kind of data, one could then, design appropriate measures.
And have conversations around being able to address some, and it boils down to sensitization as well.
Basically sensitization.
Yeah, sensitization
and one is not even aware of these unconscious biases. So it's when you do it yourself, and I think it involves a lot of, I thought one could make use of technology too for that.
We'll talk to Sunita about using technology in just a second, but Manisha, let me address the issue with you. As we heard there from Prabha, one of course is the intention gap. The other is where we've already seen mandates being put in place. For instance, we saw the Companies Act change and say that you are mandated by law to bring women onto the boards. We saw the SEBI changes coming in saying that you have to bring an independent woman director on the board of companies. And that has turned the needle because you're obligated under law to do so. But the former SEBI chief, M. Damodaran, says that, look, just because you have to get 2 women on the board, that's exactly what you've done. You've got 2 women on board, and that's about it. So you've checked those boxes. How do you ensure that you go beyond the letter of the law and actually honor the spirit of the law as well?
So that's a great question, Shireen. I believe that, and 10 years ago, if you asked me this question on firstly whether there should be mandates, I would say absolutely not. We women are really great. We are fabulous at what we do. We are as ambitious as the men. Why should we be given preference? But in the last 10, 12 years, I've seen that there is a huge discrimination against women, especially at the senior levels. In the current year, 2024, in January, I went to present to a board where the founder and his 2 sons run the business. And the board floor doesn't have a women's bathroom. So I asked him when we were walking out, and it was a pitch, so I couldn't be rude, but I said, why isn't there a women's bathroom? He's like, well, no women are going to make it to this floor, right? Aap to aaj hi aaye hain. So that's how much
He actually said that.
He actually said that, yeah. We lost the pitch, but I don't know whether we lost it. I don't know whether we
not
lost
a loss. Not a loss, I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, that's what my team said. They were like, you would have given us such a hard time with this client that just as well we lost it. But I think it's really important what SEBI is doing. Shamala earlier alluded to the fact that, RBI is really an equal place. I remember I was at UBS, and, UBS, the CEO has to be approved by the Reserve Bank of India. So when I became the CEO, we went to Shamala with my very conservative Swiss boss and said, look, the earlier person needs to leave, so can you please approve it in 4 months? Typically, RBI takes 4 months, right, Shamala? So Shamala turned around and said, because you're going to make a woman a CEO, we'll do it in 2 months. And they did it. So, yeah. But it's really important the messaging the regulator gives out. Yeah. So SEBI giving out this mandate of 1 director, it's not great. I can tell you being the only woman director is hard, especially let's say if you're in a traditional auto company, etc. It's just people don't relate to you. I remember I'm on the board of Ashoka University, and I joked to the entire team there. The first time I went into, you have a teach-in, you have an orientation. Yeah. I went in and the head of commercial vehicles looked at me and said, this is a truck. So that's how much he was like, poor guy, it was such an orientation change for him also that now he has to explain this whole complex truck machination to a woman, right? Yeah. So I think you need to force it on people to say that, look, women can be on boards, can do a good job. Now we can discuss later, Shireen, on how women need to do more on their part to be more vocal, speak up. But unless you don't have at least 25 to 33% of your board as women, the woman voice will drown. You'll just be seen as an outlier. So yeah, I mean, you can argue that, there are just those 2 mandatory women on the board, but I think it makes a difference. Yeah. It'll become a way of life slowly. The onus is on those women that just for themselves and for future women to speak up and make themselves heard, make them read, very important. to make sure that your point of view is heard. So
No, absolutely. And a part of the reason why we are running Future Female Forward, the campaign on CNBC TV-18, is not just for women's voices to be heard, but for different kinds of women to be seen. To your point that you were condescendingly shown a truck to say, hey, do you know what a truck looks like? That's the point. I mean, we've just showcased the story of India's first woman commander of a naval warship. Who would have thought that we would have actually had somebody like that? We've showcased women who are leading battalions at the line of control. So that's the idea behind this idea that women can only do certain kinds of roles or can only fit into certain kinds of positions. That narrative needs to change and shift. But Sunita, let's talk to you about what technology can do, and can technology come to aid and support and make things better? Because one view is that, with the advent of AI, etc., you will actually end up encouraging more women, or if you don't actually skill women in the future tech, you will actually end up losing more women. How do you look at this?
No, great question, Shireen, and thank you for inviting me here. I think, coming from a tech industry, I think we've had the advantage of having many more women who've actually graduated from the engineering campuses. So it's good that at the entry levels, we are seeing the 50-50. Of course, there's a different story as we go up and what happens there. But in my mind, of course, technology can come to your advantage, provided you have a good balance of people who are actually doing that coding. So my biggest fear on AI is if you only have a particular kind of people who are putting in that data.
You mean the men?
Well, then
Let's be clear.
You kind of know what kind of an output you will get. So I think we're consciously trying to ensure that there is a balance in all the teams that work on this cutting edge. And like I said, tech, to a large extent, at least from a reach perspective, what it can do to you from a data perspective, we've kind of relied on tech to get us this far for sure.
So, what is the data telling you at this point in time? You're running women at Wipro. Why is it that we're still seeing women drop out? What are you doing to be able to fix that? What have you changed in terms of policy intervention, cultural intervention as well?
Yeah, so a lot, I would say, Shireen, and it's not something that you will see results overnight for sure. But like I said, the fact that you are getting a good intake from the campuses is a very good story. That was not the story maybe a decade ago, right? You did have far less women who were graduating itself, so your supply has improved. Now, clearly what's happening is if you try to look at what happens in the middle management, clearly life stage issues come into play, and at least at Wipro what we've tried to do is don't paint all women issues with the same brush. Because, you talk flexibility to a kid who's out of college, and they kind of look at you and say, but I don't need it, right? Yeah. So to someone in that life stage, we say it is all about exposure. Yeah. How do you ensure that you actually get them to be on those cutting edge projects? Those same codes that you write, how do you ensure that you have women working for a larger cause there and expose them to clients all across the globe? That itself spurs ambition to say, hey, even if I come to a stage where I've gotten married and I have kids, the ambition in me spurs me to kind of do more. But of course, I think it's up the onus on the organization to step in. So as far as Wipro is concerned, the kind of flexibility offered when you go in for your maternity, be it in terms of flexible work hours, be it in terms of the creches, be it in terms of just the kind of roles that you come back into, I think that has helped. And I think the biggest one I would say is the sponsorship that we're doing for those women. Because until and unless you have the leadership who's committed in making this work, grooming them, ensuring that they have the ambition to take on the next role and the next. And I think the biggest disservice we do, let me tell you, at least from our data, was when women come back from maternity, the first ask is, can you give me something which is a support role, a back-ended role? I don't want to stretch. And the moment you get into that trap, let me tell you, it's a story that will end on its own. So we've got women who now come back and say, because I've seen the role models who've actually taken roles which are client-facing, don't put me into something which is back-ended. And I think that's what's working for us.
You know, I couldn't agree more with you, and I have to say that this is a number that I'm particularly proud of, because at CNBC TV-18, we have managed to bring down attrition, post-maternity attrition, virtually to zero. We've got every woman who has worked with us through maternity coming back to work. And I think the reason is that, because in many organizations, you actually, see women being treated almost as if, okay, you tell them that you're pregnant and you're about to go on maternity leave, that you're already sort of placed on projects that don't matter, or you're placed in positions that are no longer as relevant to the organization as the position that you were in. And I think that needs to change. We need to not penalize women for making that choice. We need to say that you are capable of being able to do both, and ask us how we can actually facilitate and help.
Let me give you a data point there. 100% of our women who go on maternity come back, and more than that, we try and see after a year. So it's not just immediately because there are maternity benefits that you get. So maybe you come back for that. But the good news is almost 95% of them still stay with the company after a year of coming back. So
absolutely, Prabha, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about as well. And also, I do believe that we need to change this idea of benefits to investments, because when you talk about maternity benefits, it's not just the woman that's benefiting; it is society that's benefiting from an investment that the government or a corporation is actually making. But Prabha, let's also understand the context. I mean, for an HUL or a Colgate, it's very different. But for your supply base, for instance, mandatory maternity leave or setting up creches and so on and so forth, that may not necessarily be an easy reality to live out or live through. So what can be done? Is there a public-private partnership or a private-private partnership that can come into work there?
Actually, Shreen, if I may, I wanted to actually tell a story about a woman that we met during COVID online. We're having a conversation with this woman in Indore, and she was a homemaker, and so we were asking her the standard question of, do you not want to go out to work, and do you not want to fulfill yourself and do more, and all of this blah blah. And she turned around and she asked us, do you ever ask my husband, does he not want to contribute more at home? And I think, as we make this change, we are going to have to start asking the men in our lives to do a little bit more the other way. And quite honestly, I think a lot of them would like to do some of it. Like, I can't imagine a parent today, a father, who doesn't actually want to be a father, who doesn't want to, take his children and do things, who wants to be a part of the PTA. But society has equally placed an assumption on dads that this is not something that you do.
Are we going to see advertising change that? I mean, the way that roles are delegated, are we going to see FMCG change the way it advertises?
I think we're already beginning to see the change in roles of, certainly the dad roles in advertising have changed quite a bit. A lot of them are at home, they're cooking, they're doing things with their kids. So it's certainly changing, but I think there is also an onus on the women to ask more of the men in their lives, because if you don't ask, actually you don't get. And I'm sitting here today because my husband is at home managing our 9th standard child who is doing exams. So I wouldn't be here if he wasn't doing that. So I think when you ask the question of, smaller organizations downstream that maybe don't have the wherewithal to have policies and, creches and all of these kind of things, then we really do need to start building the equity into the relationships and asking for support from whether it be partners or spouses or extended family to say, this is something that I do that's important, not just for me, but for the entire family unit, and therefore can I count on the support of more people to help me to do it. And I think we don't ask enough.
I think women generally hesitate in asking, because then it's seen as the guilt and the weakness and so on and so forth, and so you're trying to juggle all the balls at the same time and drive yourself nuts while you're doing that. But Manisha, one is of course the aspect of whether there should be mandates and there should be quotas. I think now the data is proof that when you do have the mandates coming in, there is a difference, and we've seen that globally as well. But the point is that many CEOs that I've spoken to, some believe that it makes sense to put out a target saying that by, in the next 10 years, we'll have so many women and so on and so forth. But there are many others who believe that it's not just about a number, because unless you create a culture of inclusion, where the women actually feel wanted, where the women feel welcomed, where the women feel that, they will be empowered, they will be part of the decision-making process. If you don't do that, you will again end up with that leaky pipeline business. So how do you encourage a culture of empowering women to be decision makers, to be in leadership roles, etc.? As in your experience working with companies, on boards of companies, where do you believe the problem lies?
So Shireen, the quotas are important for all the reasons we discussed, so that it becomes a way of life. So in the initial years, I think it's important. But absolutely, as Prabha said, it has to basically be sorted right from the bottom, right from the beginning of the funnel. As Ashwini mentioned, you basically need to hire more women. I think India is doing well. We're educating our women. We're ambitious for our women at the entry level. We all celebrate when our young girls get into the workforce, but I think we just aren't doing enough to retain them. And we all talked about the fact that we should have creches and work from home and flexi hours, and we all have that. We all pride putting that into our balance sheets, including the companies I'm on the board of, including the company I work for. But I think what really hurts the woman are these unconscious biases. That really sets you back. I come back from my maternity leave. Of course, I get the role I want, but I'm 2 levels below the guys, right, that I left behind. That creates a mindset for me, which is hard to basically then compensate for. More importantly, the boys club will laugh at you if you at 2 o'clock go away to a parent-teacher meeting. And I've seen this invariably across everyone. If I ask, where's Prabha? Oh, Prabha must have gone to a parent-teacher meeting. Prabha's not gone to a parent-teacher meeting. She's gone to meet a client and the meeting's overrun. But the mindset is such, and that the boys, and by the way, the guys go away drinking at 4 o'clock. Nobody talks about that, right? Everyone's gone down to have a beer because it's Friday, it's rough. It's been such a rough week, so they're drinking, right? And that's fine. So I think we need to basically destigmatize paternity leave, whatever it is, dad's going away to look after, Prabha's so proud of the fact that her husband's at home, she has no inhibitions about that. That's what we need more of. We need men to get more proud of supporting their women. We've created a generation of empowered women. We now need to create a generation of men who know how to deal with these empowered women, right? That's the biggest issue.
No, and I mean, we're laughing about this boys club business, but it's alive and kicking and thriving, and that's the reality. And to your point, I mean, I was talking to a CEO of a large consulting company, and he said, look, we have to acknowledge the fact that this exists, this culture of Friday evenings, go out and, grab a drink. And he said, I could see that the women were just not present because they needed to get back home and so on and so forth. So they just changed. He said, the decision that I made was, instead of doing this at 8 o'clock in the evening, we would do this at 6 o'clock in the evening, so at least the women could then come in there and participate without making it look like. So it wasn't a women thing. He said, we just changed the culture and said, look, we're going to do this at 6 in the evening as opposed to 8 o'clock in the evening. And he said that we just saw the women coming in and participating more. So I think, again, it comes back to the conscious and unconscious biases, but leadership interventions that are necessary and important. Sunita, back to you now in terms of the STEM numbers are looking good, but the leadership numbers not so much, and that's across sectors, but particularly in tech as well. So what are you doing specifically to ensure that you actually groom women leaders?
So there's one program that I'm particularly proud of, Shireen, which we call the Enrich program. And like I said, at the middle management, if you're able to spur them to take on those roles, and what are you doing as an organization to enable them to take on those roles? So I think the Enrich is more, it's not a mentorship program, it's a sponsorship program. And there's a huge difference between the two, where we want our leaders, male or female at the top, to actually raise their hand and say, hey, here is this lady, very competent, this role coming up, I would suggest that you put her there. So I think that's made a huge difference, because now we are the third batch of it, almost 100 of them in that program, with almost 60-70% of them getting roles which are way above what they thought they would otherwise get. I think more than that, so the Enrich is clearly one thing that we're very proud of. The second, I think, is also in terms of leadership commitment, Shireen, because I have seen a lot of leaders doing lip service to this, to say, hey, it's the right thing to do, you must do it, and so on and so forth. But then please look at your own direct team. Yeah. And if you don't see diversity there, then people will just assume that, it's nice to say, but you're not doing anything about it.
we've actually seen the meter move. So right at the top, so our CXO level numbers have moved from a 7% to almost a 20% in the last 3 years. And I think it is initiatives like this which has really made us move the needle there.
Well, that's a significant jump that you've seen from 7 to 20 in
And I
3
think it's
years.
also,
Is there a target that you've now set?
So it's more than a target, Shireen. I think it's simple things. And Ashwini, you alluded to it. I had a look at the job descriptions that were put out. You need someone with 10 hands, 20 hands, legs, etc., etc. Just dump it down, because finally, you're not going to be using all of that in that individual. So why even put it out there? Because we've seen that even if you give such a gory description, you have 10 men raising their hands to say, hey, I can do that. And the woman just looks at it and says, oops, this is not me. I can't do this. So all we did was to just say, hey, just put out 1, 2, 3 things that you think are absolutely necessary for this role, and just look at your slate. And all we're saying is, I just want a slate of profiles which are diverse. I'm not going to mandate whether you finally hire the woman or not, but get that slate. And that slate has definitely improved with just one action.
No, and that's important that you brought that up, and this brings me back to a conversation I very recently had with the global CEO of Franklin Templeton, one of the world's largest asset management companies, and the global CEO happens to be a woman and also a mother of 5, and she said that, she asked her daughter that, would you ever consider coming and working for Franklin Templeton? And she's like, no. She said, why not? She said, because I want to help people. And she said, what do you think that we do? So, so the idea of asset managers, etc., I think, as you pointed out, we just need to change again the narrative of how we sell these roles to women. So, Ms. Gopinath, I want to understand from you, what will it take to get more women, not just financially empowered, but also part of the formal economy?
Oh, yes, yeah. One, now, of course, a lot of programs are there. The self-help groups, all these initiatives that have been taken by the government and the banks are really bringing a lot of women into at least the entrepreneur economy and into the formal economy. See, let's understand, when you talk about supply, it really starts with education. And one really good thing I'm finding is that, apart from the fact that a lot has to be done for primary education and secondary education, what I find is that, at the number of institutes that are being set up, there's IMs, IITs, and you have Ashoka University too. We find a lot of women getting into that. For instance, I was chairing the Board of Governors of Indians of Management, Raipur, and the last 2 years, I just finished my tenure very recently, we had 62% women joining the MBA course. And that's the case with several other IMs, not exactly 62, but at least 45, 50. Yeah. So more and more women are joining. And it's also, so one of the things that even the institutes are doing is to really have outreach programs, explain to them how, these institutes are good places for women to study, get the parents to come here. And some additional points are given by some institutes, not much. But even that little that is done helps them get admissions. But how to get, so basically, in order to get more women into the formal economy, I think that every CEO or every company owner has to have that mindset change. And you know very well, that's the most difficult part. And maybe if their own children, girls, start studying, getting into formal jobs, maybe they'll be more welcoming of taking women in their workplace. So this is a big deal, because I agree with you that getting women into the formal economy is a very difficult. We can get, maybe the supply side of women managers will improve as we go along because of various other initiatives taken. But if you want to get people working in jobs, really even construction, in many others, they're not even counted. I don't know how they get counted at all, even for GDP purposes. To get them in lot of, I think we need to invest a lot in creating institutions, creating agencies to bring them into the formal economy. And I hope that our GST and all has made more companies forced to become formal, and hopefully we'll get more women into the formal economy. At least all their expenses will have to be shown.
we certainly hope so. Prabha, you wanted to make a point.
I just wanted to add that I think more and more we're finding, certainly in companies like ours, that at entry level we are definitely seeing a balanced slate. And in fact, I was reading a statistic that 52% of the people who graduate from college now are women. So there's no shortage at entry level. What we are finding is that when you get them in, and particularly in areas that are new and different, like on the shop floor, or we get them into manufacturing jobs per se, a cohort of women and an employee resource group really helps. Because then you have other people who are like you, who are going through the similar things as you, or have been through the similar things as you, to share experiences and to help. Because otherwise sometimes we are finding that women, like you put one woman on a shop floor, she's feeling like the one woman on the board. You put a handful of women there, then they get together and they're able to help each other. So maybe that's the other piece where more companies can do employee resource groups to help women to thrive once they've arrived.
Thrive once they've arrived. Yes, please.
To add to that, I think really it's important for organizations to empower their women to thrive. Most important. And that is where, apart from doing all the leadership, ensuring that there are no biases, and put in a governance system to ensure that these steps are actually happening. Otherwise, you'll always say, oh, we didn't get women, we didn't get the right fit. We searched, we just couldn't manage, and they'll come up with the same answer. But why not put a governance over the process of how this is being actually done and track it?
And track it, yes, we do have a data problem. We have many problems, but we do have a data problem as well.
It can be done in individual institutions,
No, absolutely, I agree with you. And to the point that you were making about, sending out a message, I think, again, this is not something that has been reported as much, but I think it's important because, for instance, we were talking about sectors where women are underrepresented. Construction is one of them, and we actually have the Road Transport Ministry now saying, that you need to create a facilitative environment to actually hire women, within the construction business as far as the road sector is concerned. So I think the government sending out that message is also an important one, but of course you need to create that environment. Ladies, I'm going to ask each one of you, it's storytelling time. Manisha, I'll start with you. What was the one big encounter or incident that took place in your life where you felt like, enough, I need to speak up, I need to sort of, make my voice heard, make myself more visible and seen, because, I have come to realize that there is no grace in being invisible any longer.
Making my voice heard is not a problem. That's I was born to speak. But yeah, I think, look, from the beginning, I joined the world of finance, and women are not meant to understand balance sheets, cash flows, etc. So there was a huge pushback to what I did. It was a male-dominated investment banking industry. I went into meetings, and I think I've told you that, Shireen, that I would go into meetings where I was the senior-most person, but nobody would make eye contact with me. I'm speaking, and nobody's looking at me. And that's pretty disheartening for someone who's 25 years old, who's worked through or 28 years old, worked through the night, read the balance sheet, made the pitch, thought through the ideas, and people just wouldn't take you seriously. I remember in the initial years when I used to go into the government offices, everyone asked me, are you a secretary? The best thing I was told was, are you a journalist? That's as much as I got upgraded. Beyond that, they wanted to know why I wanted to go into the meeting, right? So that was and this is when in the government there is so many women, right, as Shamala said. So, but I think the mindset was just so prejudiced against women, and I loved my world of banking so much that I decided that, look, I have to speak up. And by the way, all the time that I spoke up, I was called assertive, aggressive, I was objectified, trivialized, all of that stuff happened. So I'm sure all that happens to a lot of you, happened to me too. And don't forget, Shireen, at that point there wasn't HR or anyone that you could go to. And I think at that point I decided, look, if I want to see the change that I want to see, then I need to make that change. So I decided to just push, and today I'm very happy about it, because I think my daughter's, very proud of me. By the way, she asked me before my boss's name is Ken Molis, before he asked me at year end how much money I made for the year, she asked me. So, but that's how proud she is about the fact that, that I work. And I think somewhere that sort of makes you feel that what you did was right, and all that hard work, tears, effort was worth it. So, yeah.
Very, very, very worth it, because you are a role model for many, Manisha, and the world of investment banking is not an easy one for women, but I think you've been one of the pioneers, especially here in India. So thank you for the contribution that you've made. Prabha?
So I go back actually to about a little over 10 years ago where I got given my first sales job, and I was given it because I had never done sales before, and it was a go out and see if you can do sales at a branch head level. And so I got sent to Delhi having never done sales before, and if anybody's ever heard me speak Hindi, they will realize that this was a multitude of problems that were being created. And I spent the first few months actually thinking, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't deal with a branch of 500 plus, nearly almost all men. There were only a handful of women a decade ago. That has changed quite a bit, but only a handful of women. I had no subject matter expertise. I had limited understanding of the language, and so it was a perfect storm. So I literally spent the first 3-4 months wanting to put up my hand going, I can't do this. And can you please move me back to a job that makes me more comfortable? But something made me stick it out, and now as I look back, that 3-year stint was perhaps the defining moment of my career. And so I would say to all of you who've ever felt uncomfortable or incapable, you're actually not. You can push through it, and you will come out the other side feeling stronger and richer for the experience.
But what did you do in the interim, from the discomfort to actually saying, I can do it? What was the sort of the mantra?
I think there were 2 or 3 things that I did. One was to acknowledge to my immediate team the lack of subject matter expertise. That made me feel better because it didn't make me feel like I was a fraud pretending that I knew how to do a job I patently did not know how to do. That helped because then they stepped up and said, fine, if you're acknowledging it, then maybe we will help fill in the gaps. And I think that was very nice of them, and that was great. I think the second thing was also to cut myself a little bit of slack. That if somebody else thought you could do it, and they're not going to allow you to run 15-20% of a country without assuming that you have some capability, I just needed to cut myself just a little bit of slack to say maybe it'll take me a few more months than it would take someone else, but I would get there.
Well, 2 very important points. I think we're hardest on ourselves, and I think it is important for us to cut some slack, be kinder and gentler to ourselves, and absolutely, this whole imposter syndrome. And I was just yesterday looking at an article on the woman who came up with the idea of the imposter syndrome, and I think all of us have at some points in our lives suffered from it. But as you pointed out, acknowledging the gaps and reaching out for help, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I think we need to internalize that much more. Ms. Gopinath, what was the turning point for you or who helped you thrive actually at the RBI?
Well, many have been responsible for helping me to thrive, including, even I would add what Prabha said about the family. And I just want to make a point here that it's very important that women speak up and let your family know about your ambition. Because not letting them know is the worst thing that you could do to yourself. So just won't spend more time on that. So, well, I must say that, we had, fantastic governors like Dr. Reddy, Dr. Subbarao, and even earlier, Dr. Rangarajan and all of them. So even while Jalan, and even while I was in the middle level cadre, I remember Dr. Reddy, before going for Basel meetings, he would get a lot of agenda items being discussed, and he would send some of them to me for comments, particularly on the regulatory side. And of course, I had to do that additional, but it was so good. I can't tell you, this is some form of, mentorship, sponsorship, whatever you call that. And it gave me such an insight into what was being discussed internationally on particularly financial policy issues. That was, I think that and various other matters. And one thing with RBI was that we had, for important policy decisions, all the deputy governors would be consulted. And even if we are not directly involved, Dr. Reddy would ask us. And I have sometimes, I have taken certain positions which the others may not have, would not agree, but Dr. Reddy was very, very open to all opinions, including Dr. Subbarao also. Because Dr. Jalan, I worked with him as Chief General Manager, not as Deputy Governor. One of the things that I think a CEO can, or even any leader, any leader, whatever level, should do, is how to get feedback. And I remember what Dr. Reddy would do. He would call, 1 level below, 2 levels below also, And he'll first ask the junior most to speak and give the opinion. Because once your seniors have spoken, you can't expect the junior to give his frank and free opinion. So that, all these things we learn a lot from our leaders. And there are many things, if I can keep on talking. But yes, I think the leadership in the RBI have really encouraged not just women, but even men to thrive.
Absolutely, and the men clearly are thriving. When do you think we'll see a woman at the top at the Reserve Bank?
I don't know. I hope they will do it. I remember once Pranab Mukherjee did mention that we should have a women governor. I hope it happens soon. But men will thrive, I agree. But women need to thrive and should be encouraged to thrive, and all that's necessary needs to be done. Just give them the freedom. And like she said, you know, the whole issue is about getting stretched assignments, getting the hot jobs. If you're not groomed for if you're not getting exposures and you're not getting groomed, then you'll always be short of the potential that is required to be a leader.
Yeah. Well, we hope that we do see a woman central bank governor in India soon. Dr. Das's term is up. I don't know if the next one is going to be a woman. We've got the CCI headed by a woman. We've got SEBI headed by a woman. So, and the finance minister is a woman. So let's see if the RBI will be headed by a woman. Sunita. I'm not going there.
So, Shireen, I would say mine's a little different story. This is my 28th year in Wipro. And with the culture that Wipro has, I don't think I have ever felt the need for having a separate call out for gender. So I remember this is way back in 2007 when the CHRO then called me and said, hey, we want to start an ERG. And at that time, we started with gender. And I seriously thought he was nuts. Because I said, look, it's a meritocratic world. Yeah. There is no discrimination. Why would you want me to take one Jhanda Morcha on women and, do something here? And he said, no, that's not the point. You know, you may have experienced a certain thing here, but think about a lot of other women who may not have had the same background and experience as you. And I think that was a turning point for me, because I said, well, it makes sense. That kind of struck a chord, after which I took on this role, went on to be the chair of NASSCOM's D&I Council. And let me tell you, that is where it was far more eye-opening, Shireen, because you just got exposed to so many other companies which probably didn't have the same state of maturity that you enjoyed for so many years. And I think that's what gave me my voice.
Well, we hope that you amplify not just your voice, but the voice across the tech industry as well, Sunita, and across different sectors. We do need to see more women, but thank you very much for sharing very real, authentic insights with us. Thank you so much for sharing your own stories about what it's taken for you to get to the leadership roles that you have enjoyed, but more importantly, what it will take all of us together as equal stakeholders to ensure that we build on the momentum that each one of you has built, and that we truly do create a society that encourages and ensures gender parity. Thank you very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. Yeah, sure. Can we take some questions? Sure. I can't. Okay, any questions? If you can raise your hands, we'll get a microphone across to you. There's one right there, and there's one right here.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. This is
One second. The mic's not off. If you can just, now.
Yeah, so my name is Sanju Trivedi. I myself have kick-started my career after a 5 years gap. So I relate to this talk so much, but my point is, like, these talks are for the leadership roles. What about the employee level roles, right? For example, for a nuclear family where there is a husband and a wife and there is a child of 5 years old, the husband is told to go to the office and he will take care of the role, but the wife has to step back. So what for that woman?
Yes, please.
Change the husband.
a serious note.
No, my point is we are given the maternity leaves, but the paternity leaves are only for 30 days or 20 days right now.
Yeah.
So why don't we
move to
like
parental
change-
leaves? Yeah, I agree. And I think that is something many companies are looking at this point in time. You know, this business of 6 months mandatory maternity, and then companies have 15 days or 3 weeks or whatever for paternity. But do you think that we should now look at parental leave, Sunita? Is that something that you're looking
So
at?
definitely parental leave will help. In fact, even this 10 days or 15 days, the guys are actually struggling to take it, because now it's like the wife says, but you have it, so you better take it.
Yeah.
But on a different note, let me also tell you that this is a problem, because you have a lot of women who've actually exited from the workforce just because they're not able to cope in those initial years. And I think it's imperative for organizations to tap into that pool. Because what we've realized is these are educated women who've actually been working, taken a side step, and now corporates are snooty to say, oh, you've got a 5-year gap in your resume, I don't need you. So what we've done is the Begin Again program, which is all about tapping into women like that, encouraging them to go through technical skills, because we don't want to lower the merit just because you've come in from a different pool. And putting them through the same interviewing methodology that is used for the rest. And let me tell you, more than 200 women have come into the company with that kind of a gap, and we have not really told people that this is the way in which we have selected them. So I think a lot more other than paternity leave and paternal leave, of course, but I think aspects like this will also help women to get back, even if they decide to take that break.
Yeah, so returnship programs, etc. Well, we wish you the very best of luck, and I hope that this is of help to you, and I hope that you do address the situation that you're currently faced with, which I know a lot of women do face. It's a very real challenge and a real problem. Yes, I think you had a question. If you can just raise your hand so that he can get the microphone.
Hi, I am Pallavi. I work with TransUnion. So, in 2024, we are still talking about mental, shift. And I'll just supplement what she said. We do not incentivize women coming back in their career. We do not have promotion policies for women who have gone to maternity. So you have taken a maternity leave, you are there in a maternity leave for 3-4 months.
Yeah.
You are not eligible for promotions. If you go back, what RBI has done, the government has done, they're incentivizing women to take Stand Up India loans. They're incentivizing Sukanya Samriddhi. But coming back to the workforce is not incentivized. Why not we look towards these things rather than say, have a mental shift, reward, you have to reward. Now, the thought process of reward, instead of saying quota, should come into place.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Just
Ms.
one,
Gopinath?
because I know one, and I think a couple of companies also do that. One thing they do is to have your rating is protected.
Yeah.
So, when you go on maternity leave, whatever rating you have had, that is protected even after you return. And then, yes, the organization should, if they're not, but they should give you, say, a 1-year time to kind of settle down after coming from maternity leave, update whatever needs to be done. And so they'll wait, they'll keep your protection, your rating for a year, and then it will be reviewed after a year to see if you are still up to the mark. So I think these kind of policies, and there could be many more, it's an incentive for you to come back and put your heart into your work. So anything more, if any of you all have any suggestions?
Yeah, Sunita.
No, we've had instances of women who've actually been on maternity leave and getting promoted.
Working,
and getting promoted. So because the cycle happens to be then, so what? You're still getting that promotion.
Well, it is work in progress, but at least you have heard here from our panelists that change is, at least in some organizations, is happening, and we do hope that much more of that translates into changes on the ground. Well, yes, sir. Can I conclude, or should I take more questions? There's one lady there. Okay, okay, that's the final one. Yeah. Okay.
Hi. So when we talk of inclusive workplace, we are talking a lot on women employee friendly policies. 6-month paid leave, period leaves, and lot other. But I'm not talking about few good organization, but this is my personal experience, and I'm into recruitment. So I know because of these policies, people, women are losing their jobs. They are not even getting employed. And even they are working, when they get pregnant, they are suddenly stop performing well. It is told to them that there are some performance issues, so they are asked to leave. So what could be done here? Because holistically, these policies may look very good, but are they actually doing any good to women?
Yes, Prabha.
I think firstly, I would urge all women to, on these kind of things, to vote with their feet and to choose organizations that have a good track record of treating all of their employees with equity and consideration at different points in time. And this could be women, this could be men. I mean, everybody goes through phases in life where you need support. And I think choosing an organization, and that's something that's entirely in our control where we choose to work. And particularly in the India of today, I can tell you from a recruiter's perspective, we're always looking for good women to come to work. And you've heard this entire panel saying that we're trying to get more and more women in and get them up through the levels. So finding a good organization is perhaps the answer to that, because the few companies that haven't cottoned on to, making sure that their employees are treated with respect and with equity, particularly when they need it, are perhaps not great places to work.
Yeah, please.
Just want to quickly add, and I don't want this to sound utopian, but 20 years ago in the world of finance, companies which had high corporate governance, nobody cared about, right? I mean, it was great. It was a nice thing to have that you have good corporate governance, good board, but over time, markets started rewarding you. When I say markets, I mean it showed in market caps, etc. It's now happening the same way in DEI. It's slow, but if companies which are seen as having a diverse board, higher gender diversity, are seen as companies which are better quality. So I think it's a slow process, but I think the market will force a lot of the change. I think Ashwini said earlier that it's a demand side issue, and I think on the demand side, the markets, which is what all corporates care about eventually, will force the change. Second, just a quick point, I think you're absolutely right. All these policies are there, it's great, but what we need to do is to create men as allies, celebrate the men who are allies. Shamala mentions about RBI, everyone celebrating the women and the juniors so normally. To me, that's like an outlier, right? I haven't seen that happen. So I think we need to celebrate men because they're part of the problem, right? They are the problem, right? So, you need to celebrate them, make them feel secure that if they are championing women causes, they are actually getting a promotion or a little badge or whatever. And I know organizations such as Amazon, Google do that. So more organizations need to do that, and then these policies will actually become effective.
Yes, I will give you the final question to close.
Hi, I'm Mohana, and I worked in the legal team at Wipro, so I'm aware of you, Sunita ma'am. I've met you a couple of times. I'm now doing psychology, and the question that was asked earlier, it just made me think about we're doing a lot on the demand side factors, and Dr. Ashwini mentioned how supply side factors play a role, but not maybe as important as demand side. I don't know. From a systemic perspective, there are programs that help women scale up and everything. But from a systemic perspective, at their homes, is there any thought that's put into when we are making these policies as to how do we address these issues that are so ingrained in the society, which are actually stopping women, and not just women, but like other people from other genders as well? So what is the thought, and you're all on very senior level, so you might know what is the thought that is there in terms of systemic factors and coming up with programs which address some of these at certain levels? Thank you.
Ma'am, you want to take that?
I've actually seen for myself, I'd gone to Jaipur recently where the Crystal Foundation, they have what is called a Sakhi system. And one of the ladies just, narrated her story where she said she was not, she wanted to join this group, and, they provide financial counseling to all the village women there, tell them about all the schemes of the government. A lot of them don't even know what facilities government is making them available. So that is the job of a Sakhi. Now this girl, she came out of the house, and of course it was not easy for her because, in the village, But she decided that she's going to come out of the house, and it was not very much liked by her husband, or because she was known more as somebody's daughter-in-law or somebody's wife, and she didn't have an identity of her own. But she came out and she started this, and now she's even earning, you know, they get some commissions. Yeah. And she's so proud of the fact that she's now on her own and she has got her own identity. So I think ultimately it is for the women also to really, you know, I think the communication with the family, with your parents initially, because, you know, that is where sometimes the barriers start. Although it didn't happen in, I'm sure, none of our cases, but even so, or with the society around you. And like they say like, you know, there's a woman behind every man. Sometimes behind every woman, you need to have a woman only. You yourself are behind you. So I think that's very important. Otherwise, you cannot make systemic changes just by having policies or schemes and all of that. It has to, you know, come within you.
And I have to say, you know, I'll end by saying that I truly believe in the power of role modeling as well as the power of storytelling. And I'll leave you with the story of India's first female firefighter. And she was, you know, she said, I decided that I'm going to do this, and she took her father with her to the college, and the clerical staff over there said, but, you know, take her back because she's not going to be able to cut it here because this is, you know, there's no women here. And she was the only woman there amongst 200 boys, and her father said, well, that's what she wants to do, then that's what she's going to do. And today she is India's first female firefighter. And so I think that, you know, encouraging these conversations to happen, visually seeing this is also going to force change in society. At least that's my hope, that is my belief. But ladies and gentlemen, we could have continued to have this conversation. I know there's many hands up here, but hopefully another time. And thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Shireen, if I can request you to stay on stage to launch Circle of Champions.
Yes.
And everyone else, actually, can we just do one? All of you take your phones out and put this on LinkedIn. No, everyone. Just everyone. LinkedIn, Instagram, put it on everywhere else. You can list some of the things you learned today. You can do the 3 calls for action that Ashish asked you to do. And tag all of us, obviously. Oh, I love everyone's doing it. Thank you. So, Manisha, Prabha, Shamla, and Sunita, if you can just come and sit here while we wait for Shireen to launch the Circle of Champions. Thank you all. It's, good.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard Ashish talk about this, but this is part of the efforts that are being put in place to try and encourage more women to talk to other women, and of course get more women to talk to men as well, and for men to be partnering in this. So this is the Circle of Champions, a Center for Economic Data and Analysis, the Udaiti Foundation initiative, which is designed to catalyze meaningful action by uniting a group of trailblazers across sectors to champion an inclusive workplace. I think there is a video that is going to play out to give you a glimpse into what the Circle of Champions is. And as Parmesh said, if you'd like to sign up, then please go ahead and do so right after you watch this.
Gender diversity has been at the center of my upbringing as far as I can remember. I come from a family with a long line of very strong and powerful women. And therefore, I've only seen strong women and never believed that gender was an impediment to achieving your desires or your success. And as a result, gender diversity was the norm for me. It was not something that was requiring affirmative action.
So I myself am a woman attorney. I took a break for 3.5 years when I had my children, and I know the kind of challenges that I went through to get back to work. In our company, we have huge number of women who've taken a break and have restarted their careers. So we very personally understand the kind of difficulties that a woman faces when she has taken a break and then decides to restart her career.
I was very fortunate because I got an opportunity to move with some collective action, which included, for example, the World Economic Forum Parity Program. These were the programs where I saw multi-stakeholders come together, men and women, who were very inspired to create some kind of a metrics, some kind of a program which would actually measure how women are going to move in the corporate pipeline. Now, if you ask me what is it that I'd really like to see and what I could bring on the table, is again from my own experience in working with similar people, some kind of an evidence-based strategy, which can help fix what we call the broken rungs. If you notice, a lot of women, once they enter an organization, work and then go through a cycle of maternity breaks, caregiving roles, and various other issues. So are the HR or the companies really recording this whole timeline of a woman?
Something that we have started tracking as a part of our appraisal system is how diverse teams are. What is the attrition level within teams for women? And if there are certain issues that the data is showing up, we want to address them proactively as opposed to letting it just go under the carpet.
A lot of women are going up the ladder and they're branching out on their own and setting up their own companies. They're rewriting the rules of the game. They are running their companies differently. There are different ways of working that are more geared towards women, whether it's more flexibility at the workplace, whether it is childcare facilities in the office premises. All those things are so liberating, and the kind of productivity that those companies are witnessing is, I think it's a case study.
Over time, we have seen that bringing more women into the workforce, which means many different types of ideas into the workforce, has created a far more closer bonding among the people. People like to come to work and also engage with each other. Therefore, the productivity and the creativity has taken a far bigger output than we would have done otherwise. And I think a lot of people in our team are believing it, and that is giving a further fillip for people to do more of that.
And it's my absolute pleasure to invite you, Pooja, to come up on stage to give the closing remarks. We've had such fun collaborating with our teams over the past few weeks, months. I don't know what you're going to do on well, our next thing together, but until then, thank you so much. And everyone, this is Pooja.
I'm still deep in thought, so, but the conversations today triggered a story. There is a neuroscientist, Shankar Vedantam, that I like to read and follow, and he runs a brilliant podcast called The Hidden Brain. Many years ago, he recounted an incident about swimming. He learned to swim as an adult. He was mortally afraid of water, but he was committed to making that happen. He was practicing very hard. He was being disciplined about it and would take any opportunity to kind of show himself, or prove to himself that this fear of water had gone out. He would try that. He was once vacationing with his family, a 2-year-old daughter and wife in Hawaii, and he thought, he was chilling in the water, he thought, okay, let me just swim to the reef, which was about 250 meters away. So he started swimming towards that with powerful strokes. He started to move and feeling good about himself. He thought, wow, I can swim. All this hard work that I have been putting in over the last few years, it's finally really showing. I've built my muscle and it's paying off, and I'm no longer afraid of water. And he was mentally patting himself on the back at the progress he'd made. After reaching there, he took a breather and then turned around and started to swim back. Except that he was using all his strokes. He was trying very hard, but he felt like he was just not moving. At that point, he panicked. He was like, what's happening? He started to question himself. Oh God, why didn't I take a life jacket? Why didn't I wear a wetsuit? And somehow he mustered the seemingly impossible strength, the vision of her 2-year-old daughter there, and made it back to the shore, arriving there on the verge of collapse. But more than the reality check of this being a reality check of his athletic capacity, it is a very apt metaphor for how currents work. He realized once he was on the shore that when he was going towards the reef, the current was aiding him. And when he was coming against, the current was against him. And when undercurrents aid us, we are invariably unconscious of them. We always praise ourselves, our talent, our hard work for whatever we accomplish. And only when we are swimming against the tide that we pay attention to the environment and we really question what might be going on. Why am I not able to accomplish this? And women and other minority groups feel this undercurrent all the time. That, and they propel forward despite it. Having said that, in the first 2 decades of my career, I, just like a lot of the panelists said, Sunita said that, I never felt like there was any discrimination. I always thought world is a meritocratic place. It's only in the last decade that as I mentored other entrepreneurs, other business leaders, started investing in some of the startups, I began to see some of the systemic barriers that women were specifically facing. And it forced me to think maybe during these first 2 decades also I was also viewing it from a position of privilege. I went to Udaiti Delhi and doors opened easy for me than a lot of other people. So people who come from privilege, it just takes a lot more effort for us to acknowledge that and be aware of it. And I think a lot of what we heard today was that just the fact of that acknowledgement and awareness will go a long way. I mean, metrics matter, data matters, disclosure matters, but finally, you put a number and metrics and compliance and policies and laws with check mark, kuch na kuch people will find a way out to kind of say, okay, we've met these marks. But finally, acknowledging and being continuously aware of it will be very, very important. So as Ashwini said, we've come a long way when it comes to women's education, health, employability markers. There is a strong supply of educated, talented, employable women. But there are systemic undercurrents that are impeding us and causing them to drop out of the workforce. And the only way is awareness and acknowledgement. That so many of you made the time today to come here and engage is a testament to the fact that we are past the stage of only speaking about it. I know it just seems like we are saying the same thing, but I think we are ready to actively make change happen on the ground through specific, measurable initiatives and really take the bull by the horns. I want to thank each one of you for joining us, lending your support in turning the flow of this current. On behalf of the entire Udaiti team, our heartfelt gratitude to our partners, Godrej DEI Lab and Godrej for graciously hosting us. I promised that I would say, we love you, we love you, we love you. It was just, thank you, Parmesh, Roshni, Supriya, Roli, the entire team, Nisa, for being really such hospitable hosts. And thank you, Parmesh, for pushing back when you did. So it's been amazing. So I'm at a loss of words in expressing our gratitude. Thank you. The entire CEDA team, Dr. Ashwini, Kanika, Anisha, Akshi,
not just for the active support that they've provided in building the Women in India Inc. program, but also detailed feedback on every knowledge output. There have been so many occasions when we've kind of reached out to them, Kal tak, we need the feedback by tomorrow, can you do the edits? And they've all kind of stepped up, and all this while juggling their daytime jobs of teaching and research. So thank you very much. Dasra, Future Female Forward, and Shireen Ban, who've gone out of their way to partner with us towards really shaping a more inclusive and empowered future, streaming this live and bringing this key economic, social and economic issue to the fore. To all the panelists and speakers, Ashish had to leave for another event, but Shri, thank you so much for spending the whole day here and spending so much time with the Udaiti team. Shyamla, Prabha, Manisha, Sunita, you've flown all the way from Bangalore, thank you. It was so insightful to hear about all your experiences, specific ideas, and the depth of commitment. I know you are all so busy, so it just means a lot that you're here to support us. And finally, a big round of applause for the Udaiti team that has worked day in and day out at bringing the summit together, along with the Godrej team. Riya, Akanksha, Roshni, Seema, Devki, Karthik, Anand, Khushi, they're all here in the audience. Ranjula, Samriddhi. Thank you, and over to you, Parmesh. The Sutradhar.
Thank you. So the party continues over snacks, where we can ask our panelists all the questions that we wanted to. Again, but there are 2 exits, so as you move elegantly out from either one of them and, hang out for snacks, if you are at Godrej, over the next weeks, there's going to be multiple things that are happening, whether it's agribusiness summits, whether it's chemicals, whether it's properties. We're taking our Women's Day celebrations to Malanpur, the GCPL factory there on March 8th. There's lots, so please be part of all of our events over the next few weeks and years. If you're not from Godrej, sign up to the DEI Lab LinkedIn, Insta, and so you can find out our stuff and also be like really jealous and have some FOMO about all the cool stuff that we are doing as well. Here's just, this is happening tomorrow only if you're at Godrej, so come. So thanks to everyone, literally. It's been absolutely amazing, and see you over snacks next door.